Yeah, good. So we're here to discuss the correct or middle way, which is the right way of doing everything. That's what we're here to discuss. And I'm planning to try to find out two questions, both of which the Rambam, who's our teacher over here, does not explain. I'm a little upset at him because he totally doesn't explain why anyone would ever care about the middle thing. He just states it as a thing, that this is how it is. The problem with that is not that we don't trust him. We shouldn't trust anyone, but that's not the biggest problem that I have, because that's fine. The problem is that we don't understand what this is even about. Unless someone could help me and find someone where the Rambam at least give me like one line to even explain what this middle thing means. Never found him explaining it. Usually, my whole trick is to read the sources.
The middle of something might be.
I don't know, what is this thing? You could read what he says. The good actions are the intermediate or equal ones. You could really say equilibrated ones between two edges, two extremes, both of which are bad. That's all he says. And therefore the malas, which are the virtues, the traits of the soul, which cause you to do those actions, are also the intermediate ones. That is all he gives us for this. He gives some examples, which is somewhat helpful, but it doesn't at all define neither what this middle consists of, nor why why? Well, where does this come from? Where do you take it from? Like I mentioned earlier, he just gives this long list of examples, and then finishes and says, and doing the middle thing is a mitzvah, as it says, Valachta b'drachav, and the right thing is the middle thing, so that's Hashem's way, of course. Thank you very much. That was a great proof. Did he reread it on Shabbos or one time? It doesn't give a proof that Hashem's way is the middle way, it just says it.
Right.
So this is a shtickle problem, and I will preemptively tell you that usually I try to solve this issue by finding some things in the Rambam which only make sense if you understand the logic behind it. I have not really found that, and not only that, have I found that the Rambam, at least sometimes, or at least in some of his discussions about this, which we will not discuss today, seems to assume the wrong understanding of what the middle path is, as far as I can tell. This is a big misunderstanding that I have with my teacher, the Rambam. So that's all. I'm just letting you know. There's a problem. But anyways, so whatever it is, what we have to do is to try to discuss these questions themselves. What is this middle path, and why is it? Why would anyone think that that's a good idea, a good definition for something? What is it even trying to define? What is it trying to do? And so on. So if you want, you can tell me what you think it is, and then I'll tell you what I think it is, or tell you what I think it's not, maybe, and then also tell you some thoughts from Rabbi Aristotle that might share some light about why he got to this idea, or why he thinks that this is a good way of defining things. So there you go.
I told you last week already, so. You
told me last week a pshat of why. Very interestingly, that's not one of the pshatim that Aristotle thought of. It's a pshat that you thought of. And my Chavris and Rabbi Elisha. And probably some Hasidic Sforim made it explicit, something like that. Maybe some Platonists long before them, I don't know. But okay, well, we have to... But you only gave the why, the why in a theological sense.
Yeah.
What you didn't give is the what, how it's really helpful. What does it really mean? Well, what you're saying is, and because not everyone knows, is that the thought behind this middle thing is that there are no bad things. Right? There are no bad things, right? To be more clear, there are bad behaviors, but there are no bad things. There's a print.
No bad days?
No bad creations. In the Maaseh Beresh, it says that everything that Hashem created was good. And therefore, say some people, that there are no bad midas. No such a thing, in the sense of bad kinds of things, right? In other words, if someone tells you that anger is bad, which the Rambam sort of does, that doesn't make sense. Because God created anger and it can't be bad. Or you could possibly do this without theology, without saying God. Something like existence is good, and doesn't sound reasonable to have the good behavior being of like denying some part of reality or something like that. And therefore you say something like the good that we're aiming at is not running away from, say, anger or from love or from passion or from...
But didn't the Rambam describe anger as...
Yeah, I already asked you.
An edge?
Yeah, we mentioned that question. But in general, this was the thought that some people said, and that therefore the good doesn't consist of running away of like some of the things that exist. Like nothing human is bad, or no human behaviors, or no human feelings are bad. They're only bad in the wrong way, in the wrong place, in the wrong time, in the wrong amount. So too much anger, too much love, too much hate, those things are bad, but hate is not bad. Or love is not bad. Something like that. Or at least the basic things that exist. Of course, we get into some complications here. Because of course some behaviors are bad.
So you mean the day is not bad?
Yeah, what we call something like that. That is one thought, but that's, the kids, it's not enough. I need some more mistakes to make over here first. What do most people think this middle thing is all about? And why do they think it exists? Like, why? By the way, Aristotle in other cases, just to expand on your thought, Aristotle in other cases, I was thinking about this, Aristotle in other cases, I don't think in the case of habit, he does make this claim, he does make the conclusion, he does say that almost no like kinds of behaviors or kind of tendency or kind of emotions are bad, only in the correct, they all have their place. He does say that, and he does have that conclusion. But he doesn't have that as an argument that nothing should be bad. Not here. And definitely doesn't have the argument that you're making, which is that it doesn't seem reasonable, or maybe there's a theology that says that nothing that exists is absolutely bad. Right? It can be relatively bad, but not absolutely bad. Bad for you, but not bad in itself.
Can we say that either one or the other, either all midas are good? So to say that if someone's in the middle, then he has both sides of the coin of every single midas, and that means he has every midah. So he's doing everything good. Or say the other way.
If the middle is running away from everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did read someone today when I was searching, and some people saying the point of the middle path is to have everything. I want to have both cowardness and courage, or rashness, which is the extreme of courage according to him. And the middle allows me to have a little bit of everything. Or someone would say the opposite, that the middle is something like running away as much as we could from everything.
Yeah, but the middle is also determined by some outside principle, right? It's not just the perfect.
Wait. Let me just one thing. Let me just finish what I was saying about his thought, and so this thought, there is sources, a reason to think something like that, or in other words, that would. I'm just thinking of this. That saying something like, how would people say? If we, you'll see in the Rambam that the big thing where people are upset at the middle path, and the Rambam himself spends most of the chapter later discussing, is this concept of temperance or asceticism, which is not temperance according to him, but the question of pleasures, right? The question of bodily pleasures or bodily passions, and in that sense, I know many people that make this argument. I don't know if they've ever thought if this is really a good argument, but they've made this argument. I'm saying if bodily pleasures aren't good, why are they? Why did God make them? Didn't God make me with tavis? So you tell me I should run away from tavis? Well,
So they aren't good.
there are some Jews that say they're not good.
Oh, so if you say asceticism is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some great people that say all you should do is break all of your tavis. How do you translate tavis anyways? Tavis is a thing, it doesn't get translated. It means bodily desires or something, but And then people answer them, okay, but then, I mean, there's Chassidish books that make this explicit argument, like, so therefore why do we have them? And then their answer has to be no, there's a way to have them correctly. So they go, and then you would say, okay, what does that correct? This doesn't yet mean, this doesn't, just to be clear, this thought doesn't yet lead us to the middle path, right? It's one thing that the middle path might be connected to, but it doesn't. Like, you could say, okay, and therefore we should have all of them at the extreme. Because someone would even make that argument more radically and say, extreme passions exist, and they must also be good. So therefore we should have, well then, of course, we get into like a question of, is there any criteria for how to live at all? But someone can say something like that. What I was going to say is that there is a certain intuition that Aristotle uses, not in this discussion, at least not as an argument in this discussion, but yes, as a sort of argument in the question of who to believe, of whose opinions to take seriously. And Aristotle's the way of working with this, and we talk about this a lot because it's like one of the primary questions in my life, is like we could frame it as two extremes if you want, right? I don't know if Aristotle frames it this way. We could frame it as two extremes. There's the Cartesian doubter, who is one extreme of skepticism. I don't trust anyone. I only believe what I saw myself. Even that, I'd stop believing the day afterwards because that was only yesterday. Who knows if I was dreaming or what, and so on. Extremely anti-authority or trusting any common opinions or authoritative opinions or anything like that. And then there's the other extreme, the person who only asks for everything. So what did the Mishnah say? Are we allowed to believe this? Whoever entirely only thinks of authority. And the third one would be, right? Those are two extremes. And then someone could say that we're looking for, you'll notice that the middle path, if this is a good example for why the middle path is very hard to define. Like our example with friendship last time. So what does the middle path believe? Some people and not others? Trust but verify. Those are all ways to try to say, be in the middle, but they seem to just be some kind of compromise. Something like, so what? Can you give me the criteria of when to trust and when to not trust? And once you give me that criteria, will you still be doing a middle, or will you just be the extreme? You should trust the correct people extremely, and the incorrect people never. So then we're back to weirdly an extreme. We're not really, it just seems like a compromise, but it's not really a compromise.
Well, let's say like willing to listen, right? If you're always into authority, you're not listening, you're just following, right? And when you're against authority, you want
yes,
to be listening.
I use this. I agree. This language of listening is one of the solutions to this problem. Instead of believing you could listen, which is something in between believing and disbelieving, right? Because I'm not closed to you. So in other words, that's adding a third dimension to the question, really, what you're doing. And this is something that I do. You're adding a third dimension to the question. You're saying, no, the dimensions on which you should think of, should I trust the authority or should I think for myself, so to speak, are not all the dimensions that are there. And they're probably not even the good ones or not the most relevant ones. Maybe the more relevant thing is, should I be open to what someone else is telling me or not?
Usually that's what a good middle should be. Right?
And then you would say, well, openness does not mean believing. Believing is not even a kind of openness. It's even the opposite. It's a kind of closedness. It's a kind of, I'm not even, like you said, you're not listening. You're just repeating. If you're listening, that includes some kind of verification, some kind of checking it with my own experience, with my own knowledge, whatever. But it still can be listening. You still end up with the question, should I listen to everyone? We're still not sure. That itself could have, right? Someone who just listens to everyone, is open all the time, also seems to get lost very quickly.
It's also a limited amount of people you could listen to in a lifetime.
We're also limited by our time and capacities, yeah. Or what I was going to say is that, so unlike what Ramban says that Aristotle didn't trust any authority, I don't know where he got this idea from. No clue. Literal false thing that he says. Ramban has in one of his times says Aristotle, the bad guy, just decided not to trust anything from authority, and anything he didn't accept in his mind just decided that it's not true. But if he would have had a tradition or authority, he would have known that this and this and this, that Shaitim exists basically. The story is not a true story. That was not Aristotle's method. It might have been the method of some people who consider themselves like Chassidim of Aristotle that Ramban met, but that was not Aristotle's method. It's even the opposite. The Ramban would have been mad, and the Rambam already was mad a little bit at Aristotle for believing too much of the Greek nonsense. Right? You know what I mean in the second part. But Aristotle's method, and which like Hegel, someone like Hegel took this like one of his big things, was to try to make the most truth out of everything. And he has, like, if you read the first book of the Ethics, which is the book we're studying, you'll see him saying, like, let's try to make a list of all the opinions. Of course, it won't go through every single person's opinion. That's just going to take forever. But, like, let's take the most commonly held opinions or the most smartly held opinions. Like, what do most people think, or what do the smart, important people think? And then he says, of course, then he figures out his own way of getting to the answer. But then he says, this is a sentence that gets quoted in Hebrew literature a lot. The truth tends to be consistent with itself. If you've read Jewish books, you would have found this quote. It's a quote from Aristotle. And what truth agrees with itself means that when something is true, it agrees with more things. Because that's at least part of what truth is. Truth is what represents reality the most to us. So when someone has like an opinion that basically every other person's opinion, and of course other people's opinions are always based on some observation. And one of the things Aristotle does whenever he does these lists of like what everyone thinks, is he shows you, at least according to his understanding, why people said this, right? Why would someone say, well, of course there's a reason to say this. Nobody ever says just things. People's opinions are always based on something, right? That's why often, like, we have modern people that make this mistake and say like, Aristotle said, like, really crazy things that you read sometimes. Aristotle said that men and women have different amounts of teeth, and he just made that up, and that means that he was totally off and like, no, why would he say, like, what are you even talking about? Obviously maybe he made a mistake in his count, maybe this doesn't even say in Aristotle, maybe it happens to be that men and women do have different amounts of teeth. You didn't check, you just decided that doesn't make sense, right? And so on. So all these observations, like people say, did Chazal know science? Just be clear, everything that says in Gemara about science is based on empirical observation. There's, of course, observation is a very hard thing to do, it takes a long time, and it doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but none of them work. There's always a reason to think. In other words, it's always true. Because now if you have a bigger theory or a more complex theory, you have to find a place for that, because otherwise you're just ignoring parts of reality that don't match into your theory, and then it's less true. So this thought of like all people's opinions, which almost always represents some argument or some reason to think so, or some observation, should be made to cohere with whatever your conclusion is some kind of instance of this like way of thinking of like there's some truth in everything, and therefore we can't throw away, we can't just ignore, especially not opinions that are commonly held, because the more commonly something held, that's just a way of saying it's more commonly observed. It coheres with most people's experience. Of course, nowadays we have a lot of kids are not going to get stuck in this. I'm just saying this is in the instance of the question of who to believe. Aristotle very clearly has this method of like we shouldn't throw anything away. We should try to make use of everything, and that is because of this thought that the truth is the thing that is consistent with the most things. So one of like signs of a good theory is that you meet less contradictions to it. Like if you have there's some types of theories, some styles of theories which are like you wake up and you just live your whole life bumping into contradictions of every day. And that's why you have to make a big protest. Anyways, because you keep on.
They say the protest is for themselves.
Right. But it is because every time you open the newspaper, you're confronted with like 10,000 contradictions to your belief, and then you have to a lot of chizuk and emunah. Emunah that needs chizuk is not very good emunah, because the reality should keep on. Of course, maybe you'll say someone could criticize this, saying, okay, you're looking at everything with a certain lens, things can be framed differently. That's fine. But in general, a belief is something that the truth is something that you keep on finding proof for, not something that you keep on needing to defend against reality. So, anyways, that would be a case of something like so. But just to be clear, I don't think this is definitely not something that Aristotle says here. It is something that other people say, and those other people that say this, for example, a certain Chassidish cipher that I know, Rabbi Shlomo in his book on Kabbalah and on Chassidus says this argument about pleasure from food, and he ends up with a much more extreme theory. It doesn't say, okay, and therefore the answer is to be in the correct amount, to be in the middle. Precisely because this argument seems to lead if you take this argument, it seems to me now to lead to something more radical.
Like what?
Like, I'm going to get very, very complicated if I get into this. But the basic problem that I'm saying is like, even what I just described, if you take the example of what I just described about taking different people's opinions and saying, okay, I have some place for it, Aristotle's version of doing that is a very, how would I say, Batish version of doing it, right? He doesn't say, everyone is right, they're just partially right, and what we have to do is like be mild and etzoitzes of everyone, things like that. He usually says like things that are very, very simple, like, whoever said that the good is only the good of the soul must have meant this, or something like that. He ends up taking things in a very limited and partial way. And the same thing here, if you would say like, if I'll tell you something like this, the correct amount of appetite for food or love of food is the correct amount, not too much, not too little. I'm imagining, for some reason, maybe there's because people love drama, I don't know. I sort of think that most people wouldn't be very satisfied with that. Especially the people who have this argument. Makes sense? I don't know why. Maybe because of what I just said, like they'll say, okay, well, why do the extreme versions of these exist?
Meaning the argument that everything is good?
Again, the reason why the argument against the extreme.
Because you end up saying not everything is good.
Destroys the other midah, and the matter it doesn't destroy the other midah. That's the point.
Which other one? Like the midah of moderation, or the midah of not being a fresa. Yeah, but we're a little bit using, like Shlomo said, we're using the word midah now in two different ways. Because when you're saying that everything good, you mean every created thing, or something like every natural thing is good. So every natural urge that I have must be good. And then therefore you should do it moderately. Why? Because there's something not good in it. Why should I do it moderately? No?
Because you get to do everything.
I mean, what's good for this is to be used in a way where it's not all-consuming.
In a way which?
It's not all-consuming, meaning it's not. It doesn't exhaust all your. If all you do is get angry and you're never calm, then what's the place? There's no place for calm. But then it's like, the only thing that's weird about that is that the criteria for how angry you should get is just angry enough that you can also be calm sometimes. And I don't know if that ends well. But if you have some sort of, like what we said, like you find a way like that illuminates more dimensions to the problem, which lets you find the right amount.
Okay, so wait. Let's try to make a little distinction. There's one theological, I'm calling it, argument, which is nothing should be bad. Therefore, we need to find a place for everyone. Of course, like separate but equal doesn't mean you have to find it not everyone in the same way. Right? Doesn't mean everyone in the same level. Not everyone's going to get the same respect, but some place for everyone. That's sort of the middle way solution to that question.
Some more equal than others.
Yeah. And then there is, here literally equal means middle, right? And now, how would I say? And then there's another argument that I feel that we've started to be thrown out here, which is that we don't want to give up on anything. That seems to be not the same exact argument. In other words, that's more a practical thing. The first thing is a more theological thing. Nothing is bad, so therefore our theory should find a place for everything. And then there's like this sort of practical argument which says, I feel like I don't want to give up on anything. Something like that. Is that what happens? I feel like I don't, because I'll tell you why, that makes more sense, we took a kind of lives, right? Just to be clear, Aristotle doesn't think there's a medium between kinds of lives in general. But for example, if someone says, this is how many people I think interpret the middle path, right? Someone says like, the Mashgiach in Yeshiva says, we should only do intellectual stuff your whole life. You should dedicate your life to this. And all the other needs and wants and things that you have, ignore them. Or let someone else do them for you, right? That would be an extreme taking of, like you say, and then someone says, yeah, I get that learning is great, but you seem to have taken only one need or one want or one good to the extreme, and therefore it took over your whole life, it took over all your time. What about the mitzvah of doing chesed? Does that have a place anymore? And he says, no, because I took this as the best or whatever. Right? So therefore you say, since there's other mitzvahs, no, I don't want to be like you. Or what about the pleasure of making money? I don't know. I hear you're saying that learning is great, but they just deny, that's what you're saying. They just deny that making money is also good. Well, the best it is, okay, but it's nothing, it's zero. I don't think anyone really believes that, right? I mean, there's a way to solve this problem, but and this is like a story that someone could have. No, you don't really believe that. So why are you just ignoring this less good thing, let's say, of making money? So therefore the guy says, you know what, I have a solution to this problem. How about we learn a little and we make money a little? Right? Mm-hmm. This is like Balbatish, like basic theory of a certain stream of Judaism is basically this, right? We're the Rambam's people, we're not extreme, we don't only learn, in other words, we don't, okay, no, I'm jumping because I have like a joke to make about it, but this is one.
Just say the joke, just not joke. Just say the joke and then.
No, I'm working on being more restrained because instead of helping understand, it makes.
Not too restrained if we don't have jokes.
Yeah, it adds more heat than light. Anyways, so that's like a theory, and that one then. So does that work? Is that a good theory? I would say that it's not. I'll tell you why. My biggest criticism against this would be something like, why do you think you need everything? Don't be such a fresser. Oh, you're going to be Torah Ugdala? Oh, just the Gdula enough is not enough for you? Just Torah is not enough for you? Like you've got to have everything? Yeah, I agree. There is good. It's good to make money. It's also good to learn. So therefore choose. Something choose. Figure out which one you want more and do that one. Or figure out which one, if you have a limited amount of time. Like there's something in this demand, I'll explain what, this is I'm just making this up now. There's something in this like demand, like, and my example is not even a good example, it's just a popular example. There's much better examples than this.
Style,
yeah, it's something like taste everything but never eat anything. Like, how, like you end up being a dabbler in everything and not a knower of anything. Because the Torah people generally don't have either money or Torah, right? But they have both in some kind of fake way. Right? And this is mostly because human beings are limited. Like that's why I'm talking about a choose. Really, that's why I told you this is really about a choice of life, not about. If you talk about virtues, they might be different. But this, when people talk about it, they're often talking about this. And I would tell you, listen, you're not God. God can have everything. God created, like you're saying, you made a theological argument before, right? Very nice. So God can have everything. God can make. Very cute. God can make everything. No. And there's also Yiras Shema. Yiras Shema means you are not God. One of my main beliefs is that I'm not God. I know there's some people that the main belief is they're God. You have to be like God insofar as possible. Remember Plato's language, it says, and the Rambam quotes many times. The perfection of highest perfection of human being is to emulate God insofar possible. This insofar possible is a very important word also. It doesn't go without it. Okay? And one of the big differences between God and us is that we're not everything, and God is everything, or created everything, or the source of everything. And therefore, you cannot be both. I think it's impossible for a human being to be the greatest or perfect at two things in this sense, of like two different lives. Like you can't be both the greatest politician and the greatest lamdan. And if you try, you end up being both bad at both. And this works even for smaller scale things, right?
You can't not get angry the right amount of time.
Oh wait, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but then you can't, like, if there is a let's talk about the choice of lives, because that's a little different than like the smaller scale things that you're talking about. In the choice of lives, which is where people definitely take this middle path to be a solution to this kind of problem, I would tell this person that you are making a big mistake precisely because you are trying to be everything and ending up being nothing. You're trying to be everything, and therefore you say, okay, so I have a solution. The solution is supposedly not to be in the middle, right? To be a chatzi balabal, like what's the person? There's a style, you don't learn half a day, and you don't work the other half of the day. You know, that's what happens, and you end up right. This seems to be very common, and I don't know if does this work for smaller things. Like, I don't know if there's even these contradictions in the small things. That's why maybe the whole argument doesn't even work for them. Like you say something like, I don't know, take courage, right? And let's say if the argument behind courage is something like, if you have courage, you can accomplish great things, both in war and in other things. Like, not only in war that's courage is needed, in business and I don't know, in social development and maybe in personal development even, you need courage, right? That seems like a good thing, right? On the other hand, courage means taking risks, right? Courage means taking risks. That's exactly what it means. And so, courage means sometimes you die, sometimes you fail. There isn't any courage, if you're speaking about courage, and our courage doesn't include the courage to die sometimes, right? It's not like, just to be very clear, there's no theory, definitely no ancient account of courage that says you should have courage up to the stage in which it's really dangerous to your life, and then you should back down, because then you can lose every war, right? That's not a good idea. All right, so this means that the other option, right, when someone says, wait, courage sounds good, it sounds like when you're successful, it accomplishes many things, but on the other hand, cowardness is also good. Cowardliness, how would I say? Cowardice, whatever. Being a coward, okay? Being a coward has its value, right? It saves you from many of the risks that the courageous people sometimes take and lose, right? You never lose your investments if you're a coward. You never lose your friends if you took a position that your friends didn't agree with. You never lose a war because you didn't start it, because you give up before you start it, and so on. So there seems to be some value in being a coward. So therefore your solution is, let's be something in between. Well, just to be clear, that's the worst of both worlds sometimes. In the same way, because whatever being courageous means, just to be very clear, I think this is a good problem. Whatever being courageous means, it means negating cowardliness, cowardice, I don't know. Right. Whatever it is, it means in this instance, I am choosing to take the risk rather than not take the risk. Okay. Whatever it means. So let's say someone tells you, okay, so sometimes it's worth to take the risk, sometimes it isn't worth to take the risk. Thank you very much. But the problem, the person that's a coward, his argument isn't that it's not worth, it's the argument of an extreme coward that there's no risk worth to take. Isn't the mid of coward saying, I don't like taking risks. It's not saying there's some risk worth to take, right? When you're doing this middle thing, you're basically saying that both are wrong, not that both are right. Right? Both, just to be very clear, the intermediate between being a coward and being a rash person who just doesn't care about risks is not saying that both have a point. It's saying that both are wrong. It's not true that every risk is worth taking. It's also not true that no risks are worth taking. Some risks are worth taking, and when you take them, they are risky. They're as risky as the coward thinks the biggest risk is. You might die. Okay? There's no formula that says you should only do it at 50% you die. I don't think there's an interesting. There's some times that you should take the risk where you might die. So it's actually far from both sides. It's not including both sides. Right?
Well, in
does
some
that make
ways
sense?
It's including both sides because there's an element of there's the admittance to the fact that there are risks worth taking and there are risks not worth taking.
All right, so if you present it as an argument, then in some sense it's doing both sides. The coward person are arguing that you shouldn't.
You should have the concerns of the coward. What we're saying is you should have the concerns of the coward and the greed of the person who's courageous in some sense, right?
And then you should sometimes be courageous and sometimes be a coward.
Right.
And then
you will have.
And the times
you will have
that
taken precaution when you should have, and you will have
But did you resolve this like problem of like wanting to do both?
Sense, yeah.
Or you have more? It seems to me that you have more of you. You do die.
Maybe die. No, I'm saying
You don't die as often.
You die as often.
Cowards that claims.
They don't die for bad.
Because the coward dies also, right? If the coward just ends up ahead all the time, then it's obviously not an argument. The problem is that the coward loses, or maybe he doesn't die, but he might lose a lot, right?
So very good, but
Well, they
so
also die.
He doesn't gain. He doesn't.
so wait.
What?
If you add something like the right
Yeah,
reasons.
so-
Okay, yeah, I'm saying it's a shape out taista in terms of loss, you know.
So if you add something like the right reasons, then you've added the third dimension, which none of these people thought of before. You're not really making both of them happy. You're making both of them unhappy. You're saying both of you are really stupid, because the question isn't if you should take risks or if you should not take risks. The question is which risks are worth taking, and none of these both tendencies thought of this at all. So the middle person is adding a whole new thing.
But when you ask yourself which risks are worth taking, you're weighing maybe by some third principle, but you're weighing the concerns of the coward and the desire of the
In some sense, but none of those people had concerns. None of them. The argument of Mr. Coward wasn't that there are risks not worth taking. His argument is that risks are not worth taking. Right? He's against the concept of risk. And the argument of the other person is that risks are a good thing. Now you're saying, no, none of these things are
Is that
good.
what the person who's courageous says? Says risks are worth taking?
No, not my courageous person. The rash person says that.
So he's
The extreme
rash
courageous
person who
person.
says risks are worth taking. Is he? That's not really what he's saying. He's just saying that if there's ever more upside.
Yeah, I know some
right?
people that say that.
Right, okay.
You should take every risk. You're not taking enough risks. No, okay, not enough is already an amount. It's also not like, let's see one thing for sure. You can't like take every second one, right? You have to add this thing like the correct ones, which is the thing that makes both sides unhappy, not happy.
Maybe. I could also think of a way in which will make both sides happy.
Depending on how you frame the both ways. But I don't think if you frame it in the way of like...
What the courageous person has to learn from is the coward's understanding that the possibility of loss in risk is real, right? And what the coward has to realize is that the promise of future gain, even though loss is an option, is still something that may be worth pursuing, right?
Yeah, by the way, just to be clear, this whole language of risk is not traditional language. I'm using it because we seem to make it helps us. I don't think that you could say the word danger.
Uncertainty.
Or you could say the word like there's a midah of courage. Like there's it's not the
risk is a
exact
very
same thing.
evaluative thing in a way that uncertainty
Risk
is not,
has too much numbers in it.
Right. Meaning uncertainty is something that you don't know what the numbers are, right? Uncertainty maybe is better, right? You have to sometimes proceed from a position of uncertainty.
Well, act.
Act into a position.
Act in the face of danger. That was the old-fashioned way of talking about courage. I, for some reason, think that I tend to think that the middle path is the opposite. It's not having it both ways. Only if you reinterpret, of course, it's in some sense that, but only if you reinterpret in a way that none of those people will actually be happy. So if you pretend this to be a debate between people, because it's sort of saying, and I think this is definitely the way that it's presented here. It's sort of saying there is three midas. The good one is neither the cowardness nor the rashness, but a third thing called courage. Now, of course, it might seem to, like we said something like, it might seem to you when you're praising courage that it's something in this direction, and there's like a directionality here, but what you thought courage is really is rashness. And therefore courage is an entirely third thing, because the correct courage includes this thing that none of you thought of, which is for the good reason, or in the right time, or in the right way. What I'm just getting at is that you could think about this more.
In the face of danger with concern
So let's go back to what I'm saying. I'm saying if you talk about the choice of lives, I want to make this clear. Like a choice, and just to be clear, courage in all of these things are in some sense choices of lives. There's a difference. We have to talk about this, and there's two parts of like this book that talk about it. And the Rambam, it's a big clarification to make. There are two different kinds of choices that people make. You know this drusha of mine? No, it's not a drusha. No, never saw it yet. There's two different kinds of choices, okay? One is the choice of life, and another one is the choice of action. Okay? Now, they work very differently, and they have very different discussions about them in like this work of ethics, which is the discussion of what a good life is. Because there is one discussion that goes, what is the good life? Is the good life to be a politician, someone who has the greatest honor, the greatest power? Is it to be an intellectual, someone who has the greatest knowledge? Is it to be a tzaddik, someone who has the greatest piety, some other thing that nobody knows what it is? And so on. Is it to be the person that has the greatest pleasure, the greatest amount of money? These are different lives in the very basic sense. I think when we started this whole, I gave you the spiel where you could look around and see people living different kinds of lives, right? And you could think of which one is the correct one for a human being or the best one for a human being. In some sense, you could even talk about this as different vocations, right? This is like the choice that people make when they're teenagers or when they're young, in general. Like, which life should I live? It's one kind of choice. If you choose a certain life, you could live that life badly or good, or well or bad. You could still make many mistakes. There's still many choices within that life, but it's something that already determines what kind of person, in the sense of what kind of life you live. One of the things about this kind of choice is that it's not entirely clear that it's a choice. Some people, for example, if you live in if you're born a kohen, right, or in some other societies that have hereditary roles, your life is going to be the life of a priest. Nobody asked you. That's a certain kind of life. Of course, there are good priests and bad priests. Or if you're in a monarchy and you're born a prince, you're going to be a king. You're going to be a prince. Is it a good life or a bad life? Are you going to be a good prince or a bad prince? No, that's another whole discussion. But a prince is a certain kind of life, that has certain kind of goals, that comes with certain kind of conditions, and all of that. Or like what I discussed before, if you're going to be someone a koil person that learns, or someone that works, for example, those are not questions of good and bad. Those are questions of different kinds of lives. Both of them can be done well or good or evil. And we could also sort of talk, separately we could talk about which one is the best. But even if there's one that's the best, this is another point about this choice. So the first choice is that sometimes it's just not a choice. Sometimes there's circumstances or a lot of it is circumstances that you're born with. Big part of if you're rich or poor is just something you're born in the family or in the location and so on. Big part of, right? Should you be Jewish or not is something of a life question. And for most people, it's not a choice, although people like to pretend it is for different reasons, right? You could be a good Jew or a bad Jew, but you can't really not be a Jew. All the people that I see here. There are a few weirdos that make that choice, like a Gad or something, but that's not the normal case, right? Just like it could be a king that's Mulach Me'atzma, even like a monarch king, but generally it doesn't happen that way. And similarly, the question of if you should be a person that, intellectual or a working person or a student or different jobs that you could have, even different vocations. Much of that is also determined by a lot of external things and even the things you're born with and so on. That's one thing. Then the other thing about this is, very important thing, that even after we define which is the best, let's say we can have a discussion. Aristotle, you'll see in his book, if you read it, you see that it has this discussion in the beginning and in the end of the book. Most of the book is not about this. It's very interesting. Like you would think, and people seem to confuse this, like all of ethics boils down to what's the best life. Like some people seem to have their whole ethics being the best life is to be someone that sits and learns, or stands and learns. Why do you sit all the time? And therefore everything leads from that, but it's not really true. Even if it might be like in some objective way true that that's the best life. Firstly, then you get into the questions of how to live that life well. And secondly, that is not the choice that most people could make. And thirdly, it's not clear, or it's almost clear that all people can have the best one. This is something of a solution to the problem of elitism that we discussed a long time ago. There are, at least in a human society, there is a need for many different kinds of lives. Not everyone can have the same life. That wouldn't be good. And that means that whether you like it or not, or whether you think it's fair or not, the world seems to need more than one kind of life, or you could say God needs more than one kind of life. And that already sort of weakens the case, even if you make the case that one of them is the best, it weakens the case, at least insofar as like you're saying this is the best and therefore all the other ones are evil or something like that. They can't be fully evil. But, fourth point about this, that doesn't mean that you could have two at once. You could almost never have two at once. I think that the people that try to have two lives at once, like live double lives, end up being, I don't know, I don't like it. I think there's generally something wrong with it.
That's on a spectrum, the more you... Right, the point of the metis thing you're saying is a spectrum. The more you have this, the less you have that, and vice versa.
Yeah, but that's why I'm making a difference. Soon we'll go back to talking about the kind of things you want to talk about.
Right.
If you want to talk about the choice of a life, for example, I think that it's, and just to be clear, the fifth point what I would say about this is not only is there a need for many different ones, and there's a good part of, one of the, this is a whole separate sheet, but one of the, part of being a good person that lives his role or his life is to do only that. This says in the Republic, if you read it, and the Republic uses this as an analogy for defining what justice is generally in the soul. But one of the things that, like the thing that he thinks is obvious, is that in the city, everyone should have one job and nobody should mix jobs. And people think this is a little exaggerated, but it's not that exaggerated. In other words, I think that if you find yourself, whether by choice or by lot, or like by fate, living a certain life, it's really not nice if you try to also have the good parts of another. Like for example, I'll give you an example, okay? You want jokes. I watched the interview of Barack Obama with Jerry Seinfeld. And
they in a car drinking coffee.
yeah, one of those things. And Seinfeld tells Obama, maybe tell me what are the things that make being a president bad. And he's like, I miss being anonymous. Like, why can't I just sit on the porch on Sunday and do nothing? And he'll pass by and say, yeah, what are you doing? I don't know, nothing. And Jerry Seinfeld says, don't lie to me. You don't miss that. You're very happy being the president. Anyway, like, yeah, sure. Yeah, it would be nice to be anonymous. No, I wouldn't miss the cameras following me around. So what am I saying about this? That this is really fake. I think that Seinfeld is right in this case. Meaning to say, if you're the president, there's a life of being a politician, which means being a public figure, which means having at least a lot less privacy than other people. There's a good way to do that and a bad way to do that, but that's what it means. And it's true. It's true that the private people have some pleasures that public people don't have. Public people have the pleasure of a lot of kavod, everyone knows who you are in the grocery. And private people have the pleasure of anonymity in the grocery. Now, to be very clear, this person spent $1 billion and half of his career, or all of his career, trying to be the one that's recognized in the grocery, right? Don't tell me, it would be nice to have also your pleasures. Can you leave some pleasures for me? And you have yours, I have mine. You want to be like really, and it's like fake humility, right? I would want to have your pleasures. No, you don't want my pleasures. Maybe we can have a discussion which are better, but you chose this life, or this life chose you, whichever way you want to say it. And now, don't try to steal other people, like don't encroach on my territory. I'm the guy that can sit alone and nobody knows who I am. It's fine, it's good for private people. Private people don't have that and don't deserve that. And therefore, I don't think we should let public people have their privacy. That's part of the punishment of being a public person, that you don't have privacy. Oh, now instead, you can't have it both ways. And this is me being jealous of them. Like, why can't you have privacy also? No, what I'm saying is that it seems to me that there's something bad about trying, and because firstly it's fake, right? He doesn't actually have privacy. Of course, he has enough money, he could go somewhere where nobody knows him, or like have his mask or whatever. But there's something incorrect, and I'll say something like this, it leads to him being a worse president. This pretend being a normal person also. You're not a normal person and live up to it. Or the same way in the other way, right? If you're a private person, don't try to, it's also a very bad thing, right? Everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame on TikTok these days. and doesn't help. It's actually also the worst of both worlds. Like, if you're a private person, you should not have a political opinion. Okay? Because it makes no difference. You're wasting your life, wasting your time. I think that Israel should. Okay, and therefore. You know what you should care about? What your wife should make for supper. You have some influence over that. Sometimes it works, sometimes she doesn't listen. But like, you'll have a good supper. It's worth spending time on that. Every minute that you're spending on what the president should do is confusing your role. And this democracy is a big part in it. This belief of like democracy as a way of life, right? Not democracy as a way of organizing government. Democracy as a way of life, which basically tells the president to care what I have for supper, I mean to care what he does, and none of us are doing our job well, right? Why am I saying this whole division?
I think a good example also is when serious people, it's a big sickness in the world generally, when serious people have to be fed, they're also not serious, right? Because at the end of the day, serious, no one wants to be around a serious person. It's like, oh, I'm also not serious. No. Your job is to be serious. Stop like you're saying. Like, first of all, leave the not serious type of people. Number two, it makes you worse at being serious. You're always like, I'm also not serious.
Yeah, and I think also with the proliferation of social media, people also, it's become very commonplace to be interested in, I'm not just interested in what the singer sings, I'm also interested in what they eat, and what they wear, and what they do. And
but is serious
the singer is not as good
that's like a medrash. It's not like a type of life.
No, I mean it's like
Right. Now, I would think something like that as a me that's fine. In other words, I didn't say that the king is not allowed to make jokes or not allowed to and so on. That's fine. But I think that if instead of making decisions he makes jokes, or because part of, in other words, the life of making jokes, the life of the jokester is, and there's such a life, that he's the guy that makes light of everything. Maybe the king hires him to be the court jester or whatever. Say that. Because the king also needs to hear jokes, and he also has a need for lightness in his life. But he can't, the king shouldn't ever go to the White House Comedians Conference, whatever it used to be called. They stopped it already.
Yeah.
Like, that is a very messed up thing, because it's not your job to make jokes. You're probably bad at it. If you're good at it, then you should be in a different business. Or maybe that's the correct business, who knows. Anyways, so this is specifically about the choice of life. And I think that in that case, for example, at least this is my experience and my opinion, the trying to be both usually leads to not any being done well. And this is even true for some, like what we call moral trade-offs, right? In other words, you cannot, we have this like statements like saying like, should I do politics again? We have this like statements like, the Torah is only given to people who are achzuris to their children and wives and children. Okay? Shcheres kodev. And people, the Balavatim of the world are very mad at this. Like, can't you be both? Well, the answer is no. There's choices to be made. No, it doesn't. Of course, there's good ways and bad ways to do that. But there's a price in the sense of you not having both. You're not going to have both. The life of a person is always there for his wife, and the life of the person is always there to learn. There's not enough time in a human life to do both of those things, or space in the human soul to do both of those things. If you're compromised, you're going to end up compromising both of them. So therefore, you could have peace. You could sort of figure out a peace between the different people who have different roles. And that's what a city is. That's what peace in a city is. Like, where different people recognize different roles. But if both of them claim to be doing both, that's why I think that anyone that says that they're learning Torah and their Torah is protecting the country is doing the same Avaida. You're learning, and that therefore you're not protecting anyone. Okay, now let's see if this is the good division of roles. There's a value in people. The society needs some people who learn and don't protect, and some people don't. But this like pretend, but I am protecting. That is just, it's like this need for being, I think that's the Avaida of the Nuchash, V'yisim Kalihim. You want to be like God who does everything. And also you want to be like God who creates. God is the only one that wins wars by his learning a blad. He learned a blad Gemara and he killed the thing. That's the only one that does this is God. Human beings, they have to make a choice. You want to be the one that learns? No problem. You want to be the one that fights? No problem. You're not both. And the same, by the way, this is true for the other side also. There's like the whole movement of people, whatever, that is like, the worries that also learn. No, don't try a cop. You don't know how to learn, okay? And whenever you try, you come up with such shtissim. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn. Everybody has to learn, no problem. You learn a little. But you're not a learning person. Don't pretend to be. Not a good idea.
In the division of humanity, there should be different types of people.
Like I've read some of the politicians' philosophies. None of them are good.
So in the division of humanity, this thing should be split up.
Yeah, in the division of different lives. It has to be split up. And in that sense, just to be clear, I don't think the middle path is... Aristotle, for example, has both of these discussions. He has a discussion of what is the good life. He has a discussion of the middle path. And he very explicitly doesn't connect these two discussions. The middle path is not be a little bit of a fireman and a little bit of a policeman. That doesn't work. The fireman should be fireman, the policeman should be policeman, and the teachers should be teachers. And that is much better than everyone trying to be everything. Now, this is what I think, like I was saying, the choice of life is very different than choices of like day-to-day choices. I somewhat think, and maybe I'm like doing the analogy taking the analogy too far. But I think that in a similar way, if we think of the middle path as a way of like making everyone happy, being a midas, like these people pleasers, they try to make everyone happy, and then everyone gets mad at them because they promise everyone contradictory things. And the same thing happens if you try to make all the midas happy. That's why it doesn't seem to me to be true that this middle thing is a way of making all of them happy. It's a way of making none of them happy, I think. Or of choices. I like choices. Tell me which one you like. Don't tell me, let's have a little of everything. Hello? Why are you so afraid of making... By the way, that's also a bad... Like, okay, maybe you should be in the middle of this also. But like, why are you so afraid to... A choice is always the denial of something, right?
Yeah, but you don't judge
every
by,
choice.
like you said this last week, you don't judge what the media is by one moment. You judge in retrospect through a large span of time. So
right.
You cannot make a choice either.
Yeah, I get it. In the moment you gave up on one, but if you look through retrospect, you have both.
Why is making a choice denial if you don't make a choice?
Well, I never have any full ones, right? Again, you have to think of one thing, right? Of this in one subject, right? Talk about like temperance, right? Pleasure and taking pleasure in life. You want to have pleasure, but you also want to have not pleasure, so therefore...
You have pleasure at appropriate times.
And therefore you have... So you
look back, you said some pleasure and sometimes didn't have pleasure.
How is the not pleasure impulse happy now? Or the pleasure impulse happy? None of them seem to be happy to me. I think both of them are happy.
When the results deny there.
Why not?
Because none of them seem to be happy.
This works better when it's done this way.
What?
Pleasure's you can say the pleasure is maximized in that way.
The pleasure is max. That's Epicurus. That's not Aristotle. Yeah, he said that.
I'm saying, but whatever. The point is, you actually got the most you're gonna get out of the pleasure either way.
Just to be clear, that would be an extreme version of pleasure, not a mean version, right? If someone says something like this, if someone says, and maybe I should move on to a different way of thinking because I've said enough on this problem. If someone says, you want pleasure, no problem. Problem is like this: if you eat too much, you end up hurting yourself. Therefore, you should eat bread and bread and pickles every day, and that's all. And you'll never have any stomach aches. You'll never be very sleepy after your food. You'll have some pleasure in it. I'll give you some meditations to take more pleasure in your food. Eat mindfully, and you'll have the most pleasure. Right? Now, this person is, I think, lying to himself in both accounts. This is what I think. You might disagree, and maybe I'm not opening it enough to be able to see where. Number one, he's not taking the mean in any sense. He's an extreme hedonist. He's just more practical and not crazy. He's just not crazy. And secondly, he's a very bad hedonist. Because, I'm making both arguments, right? Because that's what I'm trying to say, that if you try to do this both, you end up having enough. He's a very bad one because this life of this is moderation, this is what people nowadays claim that Epicurus, for example, promoted. If you're since all pleasures lead to something, because you're really, really, really scared of pain. Mr. Bread and pickles every day. You not seem to be interested in pleasure actually, You seem to be really, really afraid of paying any price for anything you believe in. Like, I think that a hedonist is the guy, and that's like my picture of a hedonist, is someone who, he eats all the kinds of food in the smorgasbord, and then he throws up so he should eat more. That guy is dedicated to pleasure. He's ready to suffer pain for it. But like this person is like trying to have it both ways. He ends up having nothing, have the most boring life. You remember in Socrates, in his first time he proposed the city in the Republic, he said, we're going to have a simple city, so we're just going to have wheat and bread. And then the people over there he's talking with, they say like, that doesn't sound like a human life at all. And therefore, okay, so we have to add some dips and some salt and some pepper, and it turns out that that's what causes all the problems, and there's like a machlokes how to take this. Like, does this mean that the luxuries are the cause of problems, or does it mean seriously that this is not a human life? And I guess to me it seems, at least, if your point was to have the most pleasure, then you're doing a very bad job, and you're mostly escaping making any real choices or any problems. That's how I see it. I see this like it's an avoidance strategy. I don't like avoidance strategies. Stoicism and Epicureanism, they're all just avoidance. They're all avoidance strategies. You turn out to be like a very boring person that way. Like, never get too excited, because excitement leads to disappointment. So therefore we'll be a little excited always, which turns out to be very little, because anytime it's a little more than a little, it leads to this like letdowns and so on. And that's all. And there's all these practices of how to be like excited with the very little, like be happy day to day, no problem. I don't know, I'm not very big fan of this. It seems, maybe I'm just like, this is just my nature, that it doesn't strike me, and I'm too romantic for that. But it strikes to me to not actually solve the problem. It seems to me to avoid the problem instead of solving it.
Especially when the median is just dictated as avoiding the consequences of the two sides.
That's what we're talking about. Isn't that what we're thinking of, something like that? My vision of this middle thing is actually where nobody is happy. It's the most cutting choice. This is actually a metaphor that Aristotle uses. Well, not exactly. In other words, if choice, I think that choice, again, I'm back to my like, choice means saying no. Saying yes is not a choice. Do you want to learn Gemara? Yeah. Do you want to learn Rambam? Yeah. Do you want to learn Tosfos? Yeah. Do you want to learn Kvag? Yeah. Do you want to learn science? Yeah. Do you want to learn math? Yeah. All right, you're not going to learn anything. Okay. Good news for you. Or you might have, like Chaim Kanievsky, know all the words of everything, but you don't really know anything. You want to learn something? Okay, I have a different question for you. What don't you want to learn? What won't you learn today, this year? This way we won't learn. I have a long list of things that I won't learn this year. Maybe I'll learn the one thing that I choose to learn. This is how choice works. It is always cutting off of things. And I think that the middle path is saying, do I want this thing? No. There's cutting off everything in the middle, besides for one thing in the time exact middle, which I want. So it's the precise opposite of everything. It's having the least. At least, I don't know. This is what I think. But maybe you're right that since there's this like whole story of the whole life, I'm exaggerating with this. But maybe even that, you could say like your whole life, you're only doing it in one way.
I think there's separate divisions. There's also separate divisions of things.
Like
you're right with different different lives itself for each person. You're right in that sense. You should not have everything. Mm-hmm. But this is not the kind of life you're living. This is your moral choices within that life. So you can be a policeman, not a fireman, not anything else, and still moderate your anger and your pleasures and things like that.
But it's also when you have like an external qualification, right? Like let's say, just to go back to last week's example, do you want to flatter your friends all the time? No. Do you want to, you are saying no to all these things, but you're also, when you arrive at the middle, you happen to produce something called the betterment of your friend.
Right, and then you end up being something that...
That's like the third thing. It's not either.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, the middle thing ends up being neither.
That's what happens in that kind of account, yeah.
Not half of each, right.
And therefore, but again, going back to my question of this week, which is why, what is the motivation for this middle thing, that kind of thing? Because
it makes your friend a better friend. It makes you...
That kind of an account...
What you meant by a friend all along, right?
Right, so the kind of account that does, so just to recap, the kind of account that says, I want to do both, definitely doesn't work for choices of lives. Maybe it a little bit works for this. I still feel like this whole wanting to have everything is a bad want. You shouldn't want to have everything. That's why I'm not very impressed by this whole motivation.
But
Of course, you could make a theological.
This good friend doesn't want to have
everything
flattery.
has some good in it.
This good friend doesn't want to have flattery and condescending and whatever we call the opposite, condescending or criticism. He doesn't want to have both of these things, right? He wants to have some, and he doesn't want either of these things in a halfway measure, right? He wants some third thing.
Right. I mean, people might pretend to say they want flattery, or they want what flattery gives, like the feeling of, I'm important, I'm good, I'm great. And they might also think they want, what's the opposite thing? I don't remember exactly. Something like snobbiness or being not nice. But the friend doesn't like that. I like that.
Right, and I also like flattering people.
Right.
Just saying,
it's a good feeling sometimes. Just like be relentlessly encouraging, to the stupidest ideas.
I got criticized by a friend who listened to the last week's share. Just saying.
Because he was trying to make you better.
Right.
But did it help? Like, did it work? No. So then they didn't do it correctly. Seems to be like a very difficult thing to do. Maybe that was just criticism. We have to see if it was the third thing, the secret third thing.
So looking for what was good in your idea, did he improve your idea? Then he was just a critic.
Sure. Maybe I didn't think about it enough.
Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah, I would start. Anyways, we have to finish already, right? So, anyways, these are some options that I don't like. Maybe I'll tell you some options that I do like another time.
I like to hear that.
What?
I like to hear that.
What was wrong with last week's portrayal of options?
Last week was just a description of how it might work by solving like a contradiction. It's not really Aristotle. That's a Socratic thing. What I described last week, and maybe what Aristotle's doing is a Socratic thing, but. It's not like showing the motivation for what we're doing here. What we have here, just be clear, what we have here is something like this: a description or a definition of what it kind of thing a virtue is. Okay, it's not a description of what the virtues are, what makes them good. It's not a plan. It's not a way of knowing what to do. At least this word, the middle path, is not a way to knowing what to do. Maybe something that it's included is a way of knowing what to do. But to saying, what should I do? You should do the middle thing. That actually doesn't answer any question. You never, but this is important. This only works if the meaning of the middle is a certain meaning. If you think that the meaning is to do a little of everything, then it does answer you what to do. Right? This is why I deny that meaning, or at least explicitly in Aristotle it's not that. In the Rambam it's more complicated, and in other people it's more complicated. But in Aristotle, it's explicitly, the middle thing is never an answer to a question, what should I do? It's the answer to a question, a more meta question. What kind of thing am I looking for when I'm looking for what to do? And that helps me somewhat because I know what to look for. But it doesn't answer the question of what to do. And this is actually why I think that if you want to know what to do, then maybe there's a secondary middle path, which is like something like you should keep your options open, like which I'm against, right? You shouldn't keep your options open, you should make choices. Or something like have a little of both, or something like if there's a good argument of both, you should encompass both. If there's a contradiction, then we need to resolve the contradiction. These are all the things that are true things. But the middle path isn't really about resolving those things. Those things are resolved by them in separate ways. You could call them by analogy middle paths. I don't think that the middle, the doctrine of the mean, as it's known, isn't really about this. So we should try to figure out what it is about, or what is the motivation of, like, what does it sound like? What does it tell us? Like, or why do we say something like that? Anyways.
Are you saying that basically what I'm saying is more of like an effect of the real reason? It's not a reason itself?
I think that what you're saying and what we're talking about is an explanation of why sometimes, according to some people, the taking some good of both sides, or the taking a position in between both sides, however you want to call it, is the good action in that area. But just to be clear, it's not clear why that would be like a general rule. I mean, yeah, you are telling me a general rule, but like that clear. By the way, do you think we should do a little bit of murder?
Yeah.
The murder. Okay, no problem. No, killing. You don't remember the difference in murder and killing? Just a little bit of killing, not a little bit of murder.
Oh, okay.
you get on. There's a very important question of how to define the things that you're trying to resolve, right? Murder, there's such a thing as murder, and I think that everyone agrees we should do none of it. Right? There's such a thing as adultery. Should we do a little bit of it? Aristotle has this example. He says, no, we shouldn't.
Right, the mean of adultery is all the way on one side of not doing anything.
That's one way of resolving the problem. I'm trying to say, it's not clear that if you have this like motivation of like, I want to do a little bit of everything, like keheles, like don't be too bit, should it also b'chla, like we can go back to a more extreme version of saying, is the doctrine of the mean saying you shouldn't be too good or too bad? Sounds like a very, why shouldn't I be as good as possible?
So the doctrine of the mean is not just the mean of
Because
everything on earth. Right?
I like being bad. Okay, so
It's
I like
not-
my Yetzirah, like I like being bad a little. I like being good. So let's be like that's the same logic that what you're saying in some sense. Should I be a little bit? So let's do a little bit of both.
Yeah, but
Something, like or something. Another way, another bad way of describing this, which is not.
With unlimited frame, right? Meaning I can't.
I get it. We have to frame.
1,000 people.
Right.
Oh, I'll kill 550.
Yeah. I'm gonna finish. In the same way, we could say something like, "Is this a result just of like I said, of like a decision paralysis, like whereas too much skepticism? Like I'm afraid if I decide that I should only do one thing, what if I'm wrong? So you know what? Let's have insurance policy. Let's do some more things also. Let's like diversify our moral portfolio. So now, according to the murderers, we're good. According to non-murderers, we're good. We're not the best, but we'll have to make this like compromise. So we might have a chance with everyone. All these things seem to me like to be bad medicine themselves, like, or maybe too much. Maybe there are extreme versions even of a bad medicine. Because if you're making this like the main criteria, then it's for sure extreme. I'll agree with you that sometimes if you have a doubt, you should do both. Okay, you should spread out your investments. But should that be like the main thing that guides you in life? I don't know. Sounds a little bit too much. Or in other words, it sounds like William James says, you're cutting yourself off from some goods that are not able to be achieved unless you actually make choices. So when are you going to do that? Right? This is my discussion for today. More or less. Yeah.